What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/StoriesAboutKevin. Alright, this story's called Jerome, the world's greatest badass. I had a friend in the army between 2008 to 2011, same time as Karen the sergeant, that I'll dub Jerome. He was one of the most hilarious guys I'd ever met. Problem was, he wasn't hilarious on purpose. The guy was constantly self-deluded as he truly believed he was a physical specimen of unprecedented knowledge and charisma. He was not. At best, Jerome was slightly chubby, usually had bad BO, and rarely knew what he was talking about. Jerome fancied himself some kind of kickboxer. He'd go on about his various accomplishments in the sport on a regular basis. I don't want to call him a liar outright, but the only proof, if you can call it that, was his proficiency in toe-punching people in the shin, then claim it was a distraction technique. Only other skills I've seen him display was landing several high combos in a Street Fighter II tournament. A few stories of Jerome's combat prowess and weapons knowledge come to mind. The first one doesn't even really start out as a confrontation, but definitely ended with one. A group of us had decided to go to the opening of a new sports bar in Killeen called Pluckers. There was a little something for everyone there. Family dining, bar area for mingling, pool table and darts, and Guitar Hero set up on a large screen for competitions. Our usual crew consisted of me, Jerome, Jerome's roommate Downlow. Me and him actually wrestled professionally together in a minor league around that time. Downlow was his ring name, and my roommate Bayou Bill. He was from Louisiana. A little backstory. Downlow and Jerome did not get along. Jerome actually had a bad habit of creeping on Downlow's many dates. It eventually got to the point that when Bayou Bill moved out of the barracks, the room was still technically his. He just got an apartment with his girlfriend, and Downlow moved into my room. I kept my space and didn't bug him when he had a date, and we'd game on my Xbox when he had nothing better to do. Back to the story. Downlow and I were playing pool when this obviously underage girl came up and started flirting with him. Downlow knew what I knew and just ignored her, but wasn't rude. Classy guy. Meanwhile, I was on my third Jameson and Coke and was picking on her. I insinuating she was underage. So how old are you? 15, 16, 12? And eventually left. I didn't think we'd see short girl again. Fast forward to next week. We decided on a sit-down meal and went to Bennigan's. Our usual group plus a few more end up there. Jerome spoke up and said, "Oh, by the way, I invited someone." We didn't think anything of it, but I'm sure you figured it out. As we're ordering drinks, we hear a young woman's voice ask, "Hey guys, remember me?" We turn around and there's the short girl from Pluckers. Jerome pulled out the chair next to him with a big old grin on his face. She walked past him and squeezed herself between me and Downlow. As she's trying to warm herself up to Downlow, I went right back to clowning on her. It didn't take long before she admitted she was only 16. Downlow then stood up, causing short girl to fall on me because she was practically sitting on him, and proclaim he was done. Downlow and I then left the restaurant. We then proceeded to stop at the Class 6 to buy some bottom shelf vodka. Payday was next week, some soda, and ordered a pizza. We then went to Downlow's room. This was before he moved into my room, and we intended to watch kung fu movies and get drunk. About 30 minutes into Seven Swords, in comes Jerome with short girl. He began to demand that we leave so he could get lucky. In Texas, the legal age is 16. But Fort Hood falls under federal guidelines and the age of consent is 18. On top of this, anytime Downlow brought a date over, Jerome would constantly bug them, even trying to steal Downlow's dates. Jerome demanding we leave was kind of ironic in this aspect. Jerome argued with us until I proceeded to take short girl downstairs to our charge of quarters, a barracks guards, CQ for short. I explained the situation and they immediately called a cab. After I gave the cab driver enough cash to get her home, I stayed downstairs and BS with the CQ for a bit. We were friends. Then we heard a crash come from upstairs. Myself and one of the CQ guys rush up to the third floor and find Jerome in a guillotine headlock, courtesy of Downlow. Downlow kept it slightly loose so Jerome wouldn't choke, but That didn't stop Jerome from trying to kick and scream like a madman to get out. Apparently, Jerome tried rushing down low. Big mistake. Down low had been practicing Gracie Jiu-Jitsu for about 5 years at that point and could get a hold anywhere. We get the two separated and Jerome starts talking about calling our supervisors, but the CQ guy then says, "Do you really want to explain why you brought a high school girl to your room?" Jerome is adamant that he was in the right, but is outnumbered 3-1. His leadership was notified and they literally called him an idiot. Jerome then sulked the rest of the night. We gave him some pizza and booze to calm him down. He didn't stay bitter for too long. Sometime later, we're all hanging out again. Myself, Downlow, Jerome, and Bayou Bill get out of Downlow's car and head up to the barracks. As we're heading in, Jerome says, "There's that son of a bimbo!" and beckons us to follow him to the second floor. Bayou Bill follows him, but myself and Downlow don't know what the heck Jerome is talking about and head back to our floor. As we're heading to the rooms, we hear Jerome getting heated downstairs. Not wanting to explain how Jerome ended up in the hospital, we head down to the second floor, except we take another way. We end up behind the guys Jerome is talking to. As Jerome is getting on this guy and his friends, he stops midway through telling him he was gonna kick his ass. Apparently, Jerome thought me and Downlow were behind him and had been talking crap to this group of 4. The guy then calmly explains that he wasn't gonna let Jerome creep on a female friend of his after she told him no already. The guy obviously did not want to fight, but was willing to throw down if necessary. One of the other guy's buddies noticed me and Downlow behind them and jumped a bit. We gave a sarcastic howdy and learned their side of the story. Apparently, Jerome met one of their friends at Club Tattoo some time ago and began to aggressively flirt. "Hey, I have a Mustang." She wasn't feeling it and left. Jerome found out she lived in the same barracks we did and had been low-key stalking her. He did this with every female he met in the brigade, but this guy had stepped in. Dude turned out to be pretty cool once we got to talking. When our platoon security detail guys moved into the second floor of our barracks, most of us ended up at the same parties. Jerome fancied himself a weapons guy. He'd always go on about his exotic weapons collection. In reality, he bought cheap crap from Bud K and other sites, like studded leather knuckle guards with blades cheaply attached. One weekend, he had me accompany him because he desperately wanted a sword cane. We checked all of the pawn shops around Killeen, Temple, and Copperas Cove and found several. He was picky and wanted one with a long blade. He finally ordered one online and started walking around with it. After a few days of showing it off around the barracks, he was finally told he couldn't walk around carrying a weapon like that on post. He ended up taking it home eventually. Fast forward to our deployment. We're waiting to leave Kuwait, and Jerome is going on about his extensive win-loss record in kickboxing. His squad leader, despite knowing Jerome can be a bit full of it, asks if there's any professional records he could look up. He was a bit of a fight connoisseur. Jerome said all the records had been destroyed in a fire. When asked if Jerome's coach might have another copy, he responded, "Coach Van Damme didn't believe in records." We start busting up after he's pressed into saying his coach was a guy named Jean-Claude Van Damme. His squad leader is dying and starts referring to the guy as Jacques Van Damme. We rag him for about 10 minutes before we get bored and go to the gym. We're about 6 months in, and the motor pool guys have located some sheet metal. One of the guys fashions himself some homemade hunting knives. He was a freelance blacksmith back in Texas and made some really nice blades. He shows Jerome how to do it, and he thinks he must want to make himself a knife. Nope. Jerome proceeds to make himself a sword. He's under the impression that since we had to do the occasional security sweep through our camp, that he's gonna get to show off his non-existent sword skills. Our particular camp was a prison complex for captured insurgents. They rioted every so often, and on a few occasions, nearly broke out. The blade itself was a crude short saber with a lot of weight near the point. As he was doing some martial artsy whirls with it, he attempted to chop into a thick wooden pole. The blade broke in half, and we all laughed our butts off. He tried to take it back stateside, but he lacked the paperwork and it ended up confiscated. He wasn't happy. After we returned from Iraq, my roommate, Rockstar from Karen the Sergeant, and I bought some wooden katanas at the Suncoast in the mall. They were cheap, but we had a blast messing around with them. Jerome also bought a wooden sword from there, but he purchased one of their Spartan sword replicas. He came out and started swinging it wildly, almost smacking me upside the head a few times. I wanted to teach him a lesson, but Rockstar, like some kind of anime hero, offered to instead. Rockstar actually had some sword training, unlike Jerome, and managed to hurt his pride pretty badly. Jerome received several light taps up and down his arms and once in his belly, but he never landed a single hit on Rockstar. Jerome eventually gave up and threw his wooden sword in his room, where it broke in half like his Iraq sword. That was the last of Jerome's badass moments. I'll post more Jerome stories later. Okay, so basically sounds like Jerome is a neckbeard in the military? So this story's called Who Learned From Who? Because teacher Kevin certainly didn't learn anything. I've known some Kevins and Kevinas in my day, but this Kevin stands out. I haven't seen or spoken to him in nearly a decade, so some of these memories are faded. At the time, Kevin was working as a teacher at an alternative school along somebody else I knew. Most of these stories are secondhand, but even the most incredible of them struck anyone who knew him as more than plausible. To set the scene, imagine a rather bland white guy in his late 20s who is always way in over his head and still has a smile on his face. This guy was probably the least malicious Kevin you can imagine, but that didn't spare him a few laughs behind his back over his behavior. He was able to teach in the state I lived in, but not his, which was a mere 20 miles away due to licensing issues. He could pass licensing tests in one, but not the other. I forget the exact details, but the difference in standards was a question of a few points on the test. So he just qualified for his job. He drove to work each day by a rather convoluted route. When asked about it, it became clear that he was unaware of the major highways he could have been taking instead. Highlights of his work life include: he once repeatedly excused himself from class and had an associate read words on the elementary school grammar list. After the third time, for one list mind you, it became clear that he did this because he didn't know the words and wanted somebody else to read them out loud. He tried to argue that the word brain had 2 syllables, pronounced brain. He argued this point for a while. I recall being told variations of this with other simple words. Happened many times that day, but I forget the other examples. This guy had a degree with a reading emphasis. I don't know where he got it, but I ought to go there and get my doctorate. Clearly they're handing these things out. Upon looking out the school window onto a quaint Midwestern town and seeing snowfall, he remarked how climate change was obviously a hoax. Oh boy. I thought people like that only existed in political cartoons. Somebody decided to prank him by saying the phone was ringing for him when nobody had called. He answered it and thought it must have disconnected when nobody was there. He fell for this multiple times in 1 hour. When his coworkers tried to point out that he was getting pranked, he argued, "That's what you do when somebody gives you a phone. You play along." He would get into arguments with the students that would break down into contradiction between him and a child, going back and forth like the kids going, "Yaha, nah-uh," in the Emperor's New Groove. This happened more than once. His coworkers would end these in the name of their sanity. For Christmas, he brought everybody at work gift cards to use at a regional chain of gas stations. They had a fair amount of money on them. None of them were activated. This led to multiple cases I heard about with frustrated coworkers trying to pay for gas with useless cards. Sure, it can't be entirely his fault, but I've never seen this issue with any other gift card giveaway ever. Maybe it just fits his story to have it work out that way. He could have stolen them outside of work. During his college years, he went to his brother's wedding in the Caribbean. While most guests just stayed the weekend, Kevin decided to stay for a week or two. He was shocked when he returned to school and found out he was in trouble for all of the unexcused absences and late assignments. I am told his mother got everything sorted out. His wife worked nights, and he remarked with pride that he would help her prepare for breakfast each morning by setting her cereal bowl on the table. Nothing else, not making breakfast and having it ready for when she got back, not setting out all the various elements of her breakfast in one place so she could do it faster, just a bowl on the table. He was dumbfounded by how unimpressed his coworkers were at his display of affection. I know I am missing a few great stories, but I hope you've enjoyed reading these. Last I heard, he finally scored 2 more points on his test and is now teaching at a school closer to his place. May God help the students he works with. Oh my gosh, you know what? Leave the guy alone. I mean, who cares if we have stupid adults growing up? We have stupid adults now. This story's called Kevin the Regular. I want some fries. Large or small? How much is a large? A large is enough for 2. A small is enough for 1. Does it fit on this smaller tray? Yes, sir. How tall is it? Does it fit on this larger tray? Sir, I do not have a way to explain the size of this fry to you. How about I put you in for a small, and if you're still hungry, I'll get you another. Let me think about it. Sure. That's cute. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.